All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the exact neurobiology behind willpower and dopamine, and we're looking at some absolutely fascinating insights from Dr. Andrew Huberman's deep dive into building immense inner strength, specifically pulling from his epic discussions with David Goggins. We're going to completely demystify the brain's inner strength. We're shifting it from this vague, philosophical concept into hard, undeniable biological science. Because, if you've ever wondered how some people just seem to have this endless reservoir of grit, while the rest of us are struggling to push through daily friction, well, this is for you. We're going to look under the hood at the actual wiring of the brain to see exactly what separates the highly driven from everyone else.
We so often treat discipline and grit as this abstract mindset, right? Like it's just this vague character trait you're either lucky enough to be born with or you're not. But here is where we have to shift our entire paradigm. Willpower is actually a tangible, measurable structure inside your head. It's a physical reality. It takes up actual space in your brain. And just like a bicep or a quad, its size and its capacity change based entirely on how you use it. You aren't just given a fixed amount of drive at birth. You literally, physically build it.
So let's look at Section 1, the seat of willpower, the brain's engine.
Let's isolate the actual physical anatomy that acts as the biological foundation for your inner strength. Scientists have pinpointed a very specific structure called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, or the AMCC. And neuroscientists are increasingly viewing this area not just as the hub of willpower, but fundamentally as the literal seat of the will to live. Now, what makes this structure absolutely incredible is that it physically gets larger when you force yourself to do things you specifically do not want to do. We aren't just talking about doing something kind of hard. We're talking about engaging in things you actively, intensely resist. Think about, fighting off that strong urge to break a diet or forcing yourself to add an extra mile to a run when every single fiber of your being is screaming at you to stop. That exact internal resistance is what activates and builds the AMCC. It's the friction of saying no to comfort and yes to the hard path that triggers this actual physical growth.
And when you look at the physical reality of this trait across different populations, the data is staggering. The AMC is visibly smaller in obese individuals, and conversely, it's noticeably larger in athletes. But here is the most empowering part of the whole thing. It grows significantly in people who actively overcome difficult challenges. It's not fixed. If you're someone who consistently pushes through barriers and conquers adversity, think of the extreme resilience of someone like David Goggins. Your brain literally builds out this tissue to support that behavior. I mean, Goggins is famous for putting himself through unfathomable physical and mental stress. Not because he inherently loves it, but because he uses that friction to forge his mind. When you push through that same kind of adversity, you're physically expanding the very hardware in your brain that allows you to survive and thrive under immense pressure.
Moving on to Section 2. The pain-dopamine paradox, the chemical fuel. Okay, so now that we know exactly where willpower lives, we have to look at the highly counterintuitive chemical fuel that powers it. When you hear the word dopamine, what usually comes to mind? For most of us, it's strictly about pleasure, right? Seeking rewards, scrolling on our phones, eating a rich piece of chocolate. But the AMCC is heavily wired to the dopamine reward pathway in a completely different way. In this specific circuit, dopamine isn't just about pleasure. It's actually heavily triggered by friction and effort. It completely flips our standard understanding of dopamine on its head. Instead of getting a hit from seeking comfort, this brain region demands a toll, and that toll has to be paid in effort.
So here's how this chemical reaction unfolds step by step. Step 1, you force yourself to engage in friction, meaning you push yourself to do something you absolutely hate doing. Step 2, the AMCC activates. And Step 3, because of its strong biological connections to the reward pathway, it triggers the release of dopamine in response to that pain and effort. It's wild. You're effectively generating your own custom chemical reward, not by seeking comfort, but by actively leaning into discomfort. Your brain is chemically rewarding you for the struggle itself. It's such a profound biological mechanism. The friction literally generates the neurochemical fuel required to keep going. You'll push through the pain, the AMCC lights up, and boom, a wave of dopamine reinforces the very act of struggling, which makes you just a little bit more capable of handling the next major obstacle.
Which brings us to Section 3, use it or lose it. Let's talk about ongoing maintenance. This brings us to a really vital realization. Optimizing your brain isn't a one-and-done achievement. You don't just build this willpower center and get to keep it forever. The underlying mechanism at play here is neuroplasticity. By definition, neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to physically change its structure and function throughout your entire lifespan based entirely on how you use it. The AMCC possesses this remarkable neuroplasticity, meaning it can literally grow or shrink depending on how you challenge it over time. Think of it exactly like a muscle that quickly atrophies if you put it in a cast. If you stop demanding extreme effort from yourself, your brain literally prunes away the tissue associated with that inner strength, basically to conserve energy because it thinks, hey, we no longer need the capacity to overcome.
So there are strict, undeniable rules for this growth. Doing hard things makes the AMCC grow. That's our baseline. And naturally, it shrinks back down just as easily if you stop challenging yourself and fall into a rut of inactivity. But the major trap, and this is a completely fascinating loophole in our neurobiology, is that if you start to enjoy the hard task, the structure immediately stops growing. Dr. Huberman uses this great example of ice baths. Say you absolutely hate cold water, but you force yourself in anyway. Your AMCC grows, but the moment you adapt, get comfortable, and actually learn to love taking those ice baths, the friction is gone. Your brain realizes it's no longer a struggle, and it just stops building that willpower tissue. You simply cannot fake it. The brain chemically knows whether you are truly suffering or if you're just going through a familiar, comfortable routine.
So the ultimate takeaway here is that willpower strictly requires the friction of doing what you do not want to do. To maintain this physical growth in your brain, you have to continuously hunt for new sources of friction. You're essentially hacking your neurobiology by repeatedly leaning into brand new, unfamiliar forms of discomfort. Once a hard task becomes easy or enjoyable, you have to find a brand new mountain to climb if you want to keep that willpower center robust. It means the journey of true self-improvement literally has no finish line. The goal isn't to get to a place where everything is easy. The goal is to constantly seek out the next hard thing, that next area of intense resistance, just to keep the engine of your inner strength firing on all cylinders.
To bring all this complex neurobiology straight into your daily life, I'm going to leave you with a provocative question to consider as you step away from this explainer today. What will you force yourself to do today to build your will to live? Remember, that friction you are naturally trying to avoid is the exact friction your brain chemically craves to grow. Stop running from the things you hate doing. Go find that friction. I'll catch you in the next explainer.